Pozdravljeni nazaj v drugem delu današnjega posveta o finančnih inštrumentih. V prvem delu smo slišali, bi rekel, nekaj več o tem, zakaj sploh gre pravzaprav pri finančnih inštrumentih in kakšno je stanje v Sloveniji. Zdaj pa, bi rekel, bi pa to malo ilustrirali radi. Ta predstavitev, ki jo bosta danes naša gosta, to sta Mark Duncan iz Manchestra in Tom Overmeer iz Haga, predstavlja, to je bilo v bistvu izhaja iz projekta CSI Europe, ki je bil eden od bolj uspešnih projektov programa Urbact in ki pravzaprav je ilustracija tega, o čemer smo govorili, in v njem se je, mislim, da 8 mest izmenjalo izkušnje v zvezi z finančnimi inštrumenti. In na osnovi te predstavitve, podobne predstavitve, kot to bomo danes slišali na festivalu mest v Rigi spomladi, se je pravzaprav ministrstvo odločilo za današnji dogodek. Tako da mi smo zelo veseli, da sta uspela priti gosta in bi kar povabil pravzaprav Marka, da začne predstavitev.
Thank you, Marco. Thanks. Really enjoyed the first presentations this morning. I think it's very interesting how we share very many similarities. The geography is different, the size and the scale is different, but a lot of what we heard this morning was almost identical to the discussions we were having in Manchester and in other parts of England 5 or 6 years ago. So hopefully what we talk to you today is going to be helpful, and that you'll see some parallels. There might be differences in the types of investment we're doing in our cities. There will be differences in the scale and the size of what we're doing, but hopefully you'll see a lot of similarities to our approach, and you'll be enthused, excited about the scale of the opportunity that using these investments can bring for you. I'm Mark Duncan, I work for the City of Manchester. As Marco said, we ran an URBAC 2 action planning network. It actually involved 10 cities. You can see from the map a wide range of cities in terms of size, in terms of geography. Riga in the east, Manchester as lead partner, Seville, Porto, Lille in France, The Hague, who are here with us today, Leipzig in eastern Germany, Ancona, Poznan and Malmo. So a wide range of experience. What brought the cities together was we all shared an ambition to make financial instruments work for cities. Okay, that was our glue that brought us together initially. This is 3 years ago that we started this, and it was the glue that kept us together over those 3 years. Some of us had funds already and had already started the journey. That was ourselves in Manchester and also in The Hague. Other cities, such as Poznan, there were funds operating in their region that managing authorities had established, but they were frustrated. As a city, they felt that the fund was something that was being done to them, that they had no stake in and they had no control. And there were other places, such as Seville and Lille, who felt simply that there was no chance that they would ever be able to get a fund, but nonetheless they wanted to learn from others' experiences and try to get to a position where they would be able to establish a fund. And as I stand here today, it is fantastic that the Nord-Pas-de-Calais region, of which Lille is a part, has announced its first financial instrument, I think 2 weeks ago, which is a fantastic success. Lille came to us 3 years ago and they really thought it will never happen, but we have to try, and there is now going to be quite a large fund in their region in France. and also Seville, again, thought that there was no chance, and they are actively discussing funds with their managing authority for the new ESIF period. So some great success stories. We'll talk to you more about some case studies, and at the end we will share some experiences from Porto as well, who have also been very successful in this area. Why financial instruments? It's been mentioned a few times today. The money is the type of grants that we've been used to, the type of structural funds, national resources, the resources available within municipalities are reducing all the time. All of our cohesion programmes in the UK are getting smaller, and for the 2020 period, we might be wrong, but we're planning that they will be significantly reduced even further once we get into the next programme. So after the crisis in about 2009-10, cities such as ourselves, The Hague, started looking forward. How can we plan ahead? How can we make best use of the limited money that we've got? Hence why we decided to start our first funds, and I'll talk to you a little bit more later about how those funds have grown over the last 5 years. So by making investments as loans and not grants, member states, municipalities can benefit by making the best use of those funds, by making them sustainable, by spending them not just once, as with grants, but twice, 3 times, hopefully 4 times, and on and on and on. It isn't a single investment, you can do it again and again. So, when we started our project, even Urbact, who were funding our project, struggled a little bit with the subject. It was finance, it was regulation, it was dreaded state aid, oh no, and it wasn't a natural Urbact project, which often tend to be about communities and smaller scale interventions. So we had a challenge in engaging people with the subject. If you said financial instruments, until about 2 years ago, all people would hear wasn't financial instruments. They would just hear complicated, complicated, complicated. I'm not interested. I've seen the regulation. It's that thick. I'm not a banker. I don't understand. So a big part of our mission was to make it accessible, to make it not be a mystery, and to remove some of the complexity. So we put together a short film. It's only 3 minutes long. But if you bear with me on the technology, it will explain the opportunity, it will explain some of the rules, and hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Today, we're going to build a rocket. This rocket is not to fly to the moon. It can fly anywhere, if you build it right. This rocket is a financial instrument, an urban development fund, to invest in integrated, sustainable urban development, including offices, infrastructure, workspace, renewables, and energy efficiency. There are 4 stages to the rocket. The first stage is the power behind the rocket. The European Structural Investment Fund has over €350 billion to invest. Instead of grants, financial instruments providing loan, equity and guarantees will be used more and more to support urban development. To get the money, you have to comply with the regulations, which have clear rules for setting up financial instruments. The second stage is the state aid navigation system. Financial instruments must comply with the state aid rules. There are 4 pathways to compliance with state aid: no aid, de minimis, the general block exemption regulation, and notification. 2 off-the-shelf models for urban development will be published, providing a good starting point for developing a fund. The third stage of our rocket is the machinery that makes everything work: governance. Cities must work in partnership with their managing authority to ensure financial instruments work for their city. A city can implement its own financial instrument or join a fund's investment committee. Strong informal links between managing authority and city are also important. So map your route and get going. In all cases, cities should work to develop a strong pipeline of investment-ready projects. The fourth stage is the people to steer the rocket. Financial instruments need a new kind of public servant, with one foot in urban development and the other in financing investments. Cities should look for people in their organisation with the skills to work within financial instruments. Technical assistance should be used to build capacity, securing support from the Commission, the European Investment Bank and other experts. So it's not rocket science, although it is complicated. But if you follow the stages, read the regulations and speak to your managing authority, then you should soon see financial instruments fly in your city. Today, we're going to build a rocket.
Okay, that's our little bit of fun on our project. It was great fun making it. It's on YouTube. If you type in CSI Europe, you can show it to colleagues back in your municipalities. We'll talk a little bit more about the outputs of the project, but I know that some of you in your packs have got a full set of our documents. They're very short. These are only 4 pages long. They're designed to be accessible. They're designed to give you examples and case studies that you can show to people within your department, if you're from the managing authority or within your municipality or other partners. They're not designed to replace the regulations. They're not designed to replace the guidance from member states. They're designed to be an easier, more accessible tool for people to use. These were developed in the context of the situation in the previous programme where these were new and the guidance that was available was extremely poor, to be frank. The EIB struggled, the Commission struggled, and certainly member states and municipalities like ours struggled with some very unhelpful detail within the regulations and a total lack of guidance in a lot of cases. So this is designed to be a bridge between starting at the bottom, not having any experience, and moving towards the regulations and the guidance, which I have to say the Commission have done an excellent job, and what's available in the new programme is very good, very helpful, and I think you'll find it so when you do get into your process. I'm going to hand over to Tom, who's going to talk a bit more about our outputs.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for inviting me here. Yeah, I'm Ton Overmaier from the City of The Hague, and I was, together with my colleagues from the City of The Hague, in the same position as you are now 3-4 years ago. So we heard about financial instruments and we knew about that the Commission wanted us to use it more and more. There was the initiative from Urbeck and Manchester for the CSI Europe project, and we were very happy that we were able to participate in this project. And the first thing we said in the meeting of CSI Europe is that we need a route map. How do you set up a fund? And if there is a fund, or if you have a fund, how do you use it? And this is, for us, this is the most important outcome of CSI Europe, but because it describes all the steps you need to take for setting up a fund. So the red line is the ERDF line. From top to down, from the regulations which you need to use and you need to be aware of, the partnership agreement, the operational program, and then the investment strategy ex-ante analysis. And that is where you are now. Slovenia has an operational program, of course, But as a city or as a region, you are now able to say, well, these are our policy goals. These are the types of investment we want to make, and we need a specific kind of fund. And after that, you set up a fund. You search for a fund manager. You select the fund manager. You organize the governance, and then you can start selecting projects and hopefully get the return and select the next one. That's the idea. And the interesting thing about this route map, there's also the green line, the city policy line. That is something we forgot a little bit about in The Hague. So we were very keen on the red line. But the city policy line, how to get your projects, the projects that are important for your city, how do you get them on the table on the table of the fund manager? That is something new, and I will talk about that a little bit later as well. Okay, well, this is the end of the party. Usually, like Mark said. Everyone's starting to be a little bit enthusiastic about financial instruments. Okay, let's do this, and then Tom comes and say, okay, there is state aid. Well, don't be afraid. That is our key message. We are in the business of state aid as public servants. It's okay. There is market failure. We don't want that anymore, so we do something about it. And the only thing which is necessary is that we make it legal. We need to make it legal. And there are 4 ways. And in your package and on the internet, there are good guidelines how to deal with it. But there are 4 ways for compliance with state aid. So there's no aid. You have the de minimis, the GBER, and the notification procedure. It is all technical, but it can be done. Manchester has done it, The Hague has done it, other countries have done it. And basically, it's the same with grants. With grants, you have state aid as well. So, and with financial instrument, you only have it once, because you need to deal with the state aid for setting up your fund. But once you've done that, for all the projects underneath, you've got it covered. Then it's the problem for the fund manager. So, yeah, don't be afraid. It's just something you need to do. This slide already came out from the PwC. So, yeah, this is another way of representing it, because, well, after my message about state aid, hopefully you think, okay, let's do it, we can do it, financial instrument. This is the solution for all our problems. Well, unfortunately, it's not. Because there are projects which you like as a city, but they have a high return, and they can pay back the loan, so they can go to normal investors, to a bank, and you don't deal with them from your financial instrument. And there are also projects which are very important for your city, but they don't pay back. They don't have a cash generating machine within, so they are not able to pay back a loan. And for those type of projects, you always need grants. But there is something in between, and we were having a discussion yesterday in the evening about it. Maybe it's the Article 55 section, but there are projects that make money, that have some return, which are important for your city, for your policy goals, and those projects, they can be made possible with financial instruments. And the interesting thing from this time is that national governments and local governments have less money to spend, so the room for revolving funds is getting bigger. And at the same time, due to the crisis and the banks, they are not willing to invest anymore as they were in the future before the crisis. So on the other side, the room for financial instruments is getting bigger as well. And that is why Mark and myself are very popular at the moment, talking about revolving fund. But the key message is it's not the solution for all your problems, but it is a solution for some of your problems. And again, the route map. Let's see. It's the important thing of this route map. Like I said, in The Hague, we were really keen on establishing a fund, so the red line, the managing authority line, but there is also the city policy line. And at the moment in The Hague, we have funds working, but colleagues of mine said, well, I still have a project, how can I get the money from those funds? So it's very important that you develop a strong project development unit with key persons in it. Manchester hired specific type of persons from bankers, from KPMG, and with new skills and other skills. And when you organize that, you can have a successful financial instrument. Because and that's why it's so important. The goal is not to set up a financial instrument, but the goal is to be able to finance the projects that matter for your city. So that's why the green line is very important. So if you will start with the same project we started 3-4 years ago, my advice to you is don't forget the green line. We did that in The Hague, and we are now developing it. So please learn from that lesson.
Thanks, John. Just before we go on and move, I'll give you some more examples. Just in terms of the governance slide, I think I've worked out from the questions before that all of the people you need to make this work are here. I think we've got a fund manager. I think that gentleman was a fund manager. You've got the managing authority, you've got other ministries of state, and you've got the municipalities. You've got someone from PwC, if there's some lawyers in the room maybe, but it seems as though everybody who can make this work is here. The managing authority won't make it work on their own, municipalities won't make it work on their own, the consultants and experts, the fund manager, when you have fund managers, won't make it work. You need the whole picture to make it work, and I think it's very encouraging that all of the parts of that seem to be here in the room today. So absolutely key message for us that we want to get across throughout the project and now after the project is finished is that it isn't theory. Financial instruments work. These are photographs of actual projects around Europe. We're going to talk to you about a couple of them today, but they do work. It's worth the effort, and I'll show you a little bit about now what we've done in Manchester, the scale that we've managed to get it to. But I'll talk to you about some numbers, the scale of investment, but that's not what's important. What's important is the money that we're putting into these funds isn't going to be spent once, it's going to be spent 2, 3 or 4 times, okay? So, our funding portfolio, what do we have within our pot, our basket of funding? When we started our Jessica Fund in 2010, it was a regional fund. I'm here from Manchester talking about Manchester, but our Jessica Fund is a regional fund. It covers most of the northwest of England, not all of it, but most of it. So we're talking about a population of about 5 million people, okay? And when we started that fund, it was 20 million euros, okay? So quite small. For that area. I think Slovenia is 2 million people, so not that dissimilar. We've taken that fund, we've grown that fund is now 50 million euros. It was a big challenge when we started that, because in 2010 we had never done anything except grant. That's all we'd ever done was grant, okay? I'll talk to you about some project examples, and in all of the cases of the examples I'm going to show you, in 2009 we would have given them a grant. That would have been the end of the money, it would be gone, they would have gone and built their building, great success, but it would have been one opening, one plaque, and that is no longer the case. What we have started doing, and it was something that was quite important learning in our project, is that this doesn't just have to be about European structural funds. And again, from talking to people last night over a glass of wine, we could see that there are funds already operating in Slovenia, but without European investment. So we do both. We use money from our ESIF programme, our existing Jessica funds, and our ESIF programme. You can see that Mr. Juncker will be very pleased that we've taken his message to increase the size of our funds, and we're now planning to invest 65% of our ERDF programme is going to go into financial instruments. Again, even though we had successful funds getting everybody in Greater Manchester, there is Manchester as one city, there are 9 other cities in Greater Manchester, getting all of those cities to agree that we would take money that could be grant, and everybody still loves grant, and we would put over half of it into financial instruments. Even though we had an existing successful fund, that was challenging. We had to make a very strong case for doing that around pipeline and showing success. What we've increasingly done is we also use UK funding, mostly for SME investment, but also the Growing Places Fund, which is about infrastructure investment. So I'll try and bring that to life for you a little bit by showing you 3 project examples. This is City Labs. It's a biomedical research facility. It's next to one of our largest hospitals in the city of Manchester. This was our very first Jessica investment, and it's an example of how you can use grant and loan together. If you see here, this part of the building is a very, very old 1800s eye hospital that has very strict heritage constraints about what you can do with the building. This is obviously new and modern. So we worked with the developer to help them secure grant for the heritage building. There was no profit, it was too expensive, it was not commercially viable. So grant was used to get the heritage side of the building ready for the modern development. After we helped them get the grant, we were hopeful that they would talk to us about Jessica funding. And we talked to the developer, and I will be honest, when we described our Jessica fund and described to them that it was ERDF funding, they would have to comply with all of the rules of ERDF and pay interest and pay us the money back. They said, no way, we're not interested, you must be joking. They laughed. They just said, forget it, we'll go to a bank. They did go to a bank, and the bank said, no, have you not heard, financial crisis, banks don't do property anymore. We don't invest in property, and we definitely don't invest in speculative property. So they came back and we talked to them about the Jessica Fund again. They took a loan. Eventually it was a mixture of private bank finance and the Jessica money. So we filled the gap that the bank wasn't prepared to fill. The project's now finished, it's open, and it's not only the first investment we made, it is now the first project that's repaid its money in full, and we are able to reinvest that money in other projects. So a couple of more examples for you. Logistics North here on the left. This is a good example of the PwC slide and also Tom's slide. This whole site is an example of a project that's got A, B, C and D in it. We only gave a loan, but it's an coal mine. I think it was the largest open cast coal mine in Western Europe. So the D, the grant part, was provided by British Coal, who had to fill it in and remediate the site, okay? It was then passed to a commercial arm of the coal board, and they wanted to open it up for logistics development. What they needed, what they had, was an potentially extremely profitable logistics centre. That road is a large motorway. You can see it's potentially well connected to the road network. But to unlock the site and unlock the value for that property company, they needed the road, okay? They needed the cash flow, they needed £10 million, so what's that, 14 million euros from us to build the road. The road unlocked the site. There are now 4 or 5 large logistics centres on there. They're using the profit from that. It's done exactly what they intended. It's unlocked the value. Now through the profit they're making on those developments, they've repaid the loan, I think, a year ahead of when they were planning to do it. So an example of how loan investment into infrastructure can unlock the value. And we actually used a mixture of the European funds and also the UK Growing Places Fund to get to the 14 million euros we needed to make the investment. This site here is, again, it's in central Manchester. It's a large office development. How can I describe this? So, we're not established to compete with banks. We are filling the space that the banks have left. Since the crisis, it will be different in each member state, it will be different in Slovenia, but the position post-crisis in the UK is unlike when we had the city, unlike when we did the City Labs investment where banks wouldn't touch property. Now banks are back in the property market in the UK, okay? We can't compete with banks. Companies will go to a bank first. There's no ERDF rules, there's no record keeping, there's no outputs. They just get a loan, build the thing, finished. They will always go to a bank first. So, example of how we've developed, because banks have come back into property in the UK, we've moved to what they won't touch, which is speculative property, okay? This is where our knowledge and expertise as a local municipality comes in, because we know that this development is in the heart of central Manchester Business District. The office market is booming. We know that there is limited risk in speculative property in that area. The bank credit committee will just look at speculative property and it's got an X next to it and they won't touch it regardless of how confident they might be about de-risking it. So it's an example of how we flex, how we change the funds as we go. Other example of how it's evolving is because we have more capital in our funds now. We used to only go to 50% maximum investment, and that was to do with managing our own risk. We're now, on projects like this, taking up to 75% investment in the projects. Here's another couple of examples, very similar, another near speculative development. It's a £100 million investment, and again, we're taking 12 million mezzanine loan into that development, and also another speculative development on Manchester Science Park. So I'll stop there and pass back to Tom.
Okay, thank you. Well, as you have seen from the examples from Mark, there are several ways of making financial or making project financial possible, and to be able to do that, you need, like CSI Europe said, a new kind of public servant. You need to have people within your organization that can see the gap and search for the revenue. And what we did as CSI Europe is we said to the Commission that there is a need for technical assistance for cities. to be able to use that. We are not all in a position like Manchester that we can hire people to do that for us, but maybe there's training possible, or like meetings like we have today for exchange. Because that new way of thinking the new kind of public servant is necessary, because as a public servant you need to be able to talk with bankers, with project developers, and you need to be able to look in a different way to projects. In the old way, the way with grant money, you would look at the project and see, okay, well, these are the costs, how much money do you need, and you will give the grant. But with financial instruments, you don't look at the cost anymore, but you look at the revenue potential. So how much money can a project pay back? And then you know about the interest rate, and you know about the possibility to pay back the loan. So that's a new way, and as a public servant, you need to be able to take that step and a new way of thinking. Another thing we did within CSI Europe, we described some future model for investments, and there are also now some models on the shelf from the European Commission, and there is some money presented in draft from the PwC now for Slovenia, of course. So these are all here for inspiration, and you need to be able to build a model based on your local structure, your local legislation, of course, and your national legislation. In the Netherlands, for us, we set up a holding fund. The European Investment Bank helped us setting it up. So, yeah, who knows? Maybe they will be able to help Slovenia again. So there is advice available also at the VI campus. And once you have a system, then, and in the Netherlands we have set up a system with relatively small funds, you are able to make projects possible. And these are some examples from The Hague, with much smaller amounts of money. The smallest one is only 70,000 euros loan. But we have properties for businesses, small properties, or a greenhouse on the rooftop of a building for urban farming, or we have geothermic heat for heating of houses within the city of The Hague. And just for an inspiration, once you have funds, you can even make small projects possible that make really a difference in your city. We have this movie from CSI Europe as well.
De Haagse voetbalvereniging La-Kwartier lijkt op het eerste gezicht misschien een gewone voetbalvereniging. Maar niets is minder waar. Het is namelijk de eerste club van Nederland die een zogenoemd triple solar dak heeft laten plaatsen.
Wij zijn de amateurclub van het jaar op maatschappelijk gebied. In 2013 gekozen door de Stichting Meer dan Voetbal. Ja, daar geven wij ook invulling aan door de duurzaamheid te verwerken in onze opstallen. En met het triple solar dak beogen wij ook voor de toekomst daar de energiekosten te verlagen.
In het dak lopen buizen met daarin een speciale vloeistof die makkelijk wordt opgewarmd door de zon. En die warmte wordt gebruikt voor de energievoorziening van het complex.
We proberen het maximale rendement uit het dak te halen. Zodat wij zomers eigenlijk niet bij hoeven te verwarmen om warm water te tappen voor te douchen. En in de winter, als je een klein zonnetje hebt of een heldere dag, dan heb je al heel veel energie die je uit het dak kan trekken.
De voetbalvereniging heeft het dak gefinancierd met hulp van het Energiefonds Den Haag. Daaruit kunnen leningen worden verstrekt voor duurzame investeringen.
Europa geeft daar de gelegenheid toe. Via het Europees Fonds voor Regionale Ontwikkeling. Voor projecten ook die revolveren. Dus het geld komt terug. En we kunnen dus met de aflossing van de eerste lening ook weer gewoon de volgende projecten gaan realiseren.
Voor de voetbalclub is het Energiefonds een uitkomst. Op die manier kunnen zij een duurzame investering doen waar zij de komende jaren nog plezier van hebben.
We hebben een rondje langs een aantal banken gemaakt en daar zie je dat je tegen heel veel obstakels aanloopt en eigenlijk van het kastje naar de muur wordt gestuurd. En ik moet zeggen, met de medewerkers van het Energiefonds zijn we direct om tafel gegaan. Daar stond eigenlijk niks meer in de weg om de lening af te sluiten.
So you see from this movie that once you have set up a difficult thing like a financial instrument, it is still possible to make even small projects for a local football club possible, and that is key. Well, like I said, in The Hague, we started relatively small. We only had a little bit of ERDF money available in the last programming period. So we started with only 8.8 million euros. But the year after, in 2015, our national government said, hey, you got a system for working with financial instruments. Can you set up for a fishery fund for us? So we did. So we got an extra 3.5 million. And now, seeing that it's a success, and once you have built the structure, it is easy to put new money in. So our regional government, the province of South Holland, has some money left from the ERDF program, and they don't want to send it back to Brussels. So they put in extra money in our energy efficiency fund. And with the new programming period, we have already new money allocated. We started with the ex-ante, and the idea at the end of 2016 will have almost 40 million euros, and that's a lot of money for a city of The Hague. And that's also the moment when you can start talking with the EIB, talk about the Juncker money and about doubling your money. And like Mark and others before said, it's not once, it will continue, it will come back. So it's really worthwhile starting to work with financial instruments. Yeah, and this is for Slovenia. We know that you have an ERDF program or several operational programs, and these are some type of funds you could think of, and I'm sure you all already think of. And we have one inspirational movie for cultural heritage, which is also important. So maybe for inspiration, and after that for discussion we can talk further.
Tom and I were just saying that both of us, there's other things we'd like to say, but time is limited, so hopefully we'll get a lot of questions and we'll be able to talk to you more about some examples, but hopefully this will give you some inspiration, as Tom says.
Several highly relevant projects in the field of urban renewal have been recently carried out in Porto, supported by urban development funds in the framework of the Jessica initiative. Let's focus on some examples. The project Passeio das Cardosas was promoted by Porto Vivo, who established a rehabilitation contract with a private partner. Porto Vivo was responsible for gathering the buildings, while the Floor Fund made the refurbishing investment and commercialization of the housing and commercial areas, both sharing the financial results. The project Passeio das Cardosas has won the National Prize of Urban Rehabilitation in 2014 in the category of Best Intervention for Residential Use.
O financiamento Jéssica foi importante para a realização do empreendimento Passeio das Cardosas, pelo apoio financeiro que lhe atribuiu, associado às taxas de juros praticadas. O apoio da Caixa Geral de Depósitos, enquanto sociedade gestora do Fundo de Desenvolvimento Urbano, foi contributo da maior importância para a implementação do programa Jéssica e o êxito do Passeio das Cardosas.
In the heart of the historical center, the presence and the expansion of Pestana Porto Hotel certifies the importance of the tourism sector in the city. The hotel is open in Ribeira since 2000, and with this expansion, 6 buildings have been refurbished and at least 10 jobs created. This project relies on the support of program ON2.
O Grupo Pestana, no seguimento que tem sido a sua prática de há décadas, está a apostar na recuperação do património e na sua adaptação a unidades hoteleiras. E dos exemplos é o Pestana Porto Hotel. Para esta aposta, muito contribui a possibilidade de meios de financiamento como o Fundo Jéssica, que nos permitem que a nossa vontade seja levada à prática.
Porto's landmark, the Clérigos Church and Tower, are dated from 1763. It is a Baroque masterpiece whose author was the Italian architect Nicolao Nazzoni.
O financiamento Jéssica foi fundamental para concretizarmos este financiamento do CREN, que devolve à cidade o seu ex-libris, a Torre dos Clérigos. No ano passado tivemos 430 mil visitantes, que agora vão querer regressar para poderem ver as novas valências, o património restaurado, esta casa única do Barroco, que é portas abertas a partir de agora, graças ao Jéssica.
The renovation project was carried out by the Northern Regional Directorate of Culture and was supported by program ON2.
No atual período de programação financeira 2014-2020, consideramos que este tipo de instrumentos devem ser estimulados, nomeadamente procurando chegar ao maior número de beneficiários e também possuir uma maior abrangência temática, nomeadamente na área da habitação.
The experience with the use of the urban development funds in the city has been advantageous, but the challenges for the public and private sectors, even the third sector, are huge. Thus, the experience and the knowledge acquired must be well used in the promotion and development of financial instruments in the future.
Yeah. So this is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much, Mark and Tom. Before we give the floor to the audience, I have a few questions for you, myself, and perhaps the first one would be for Mark. For how many years are the loans? Let's say so. What I'm not sure about the English expression, but so how fast or slowly they return back to the fund?
For the Jessica type funds, the property and infrastructure, it's usually 3 years, maximum 5, never more than 5 years. The preference is for 3 because we want to turn the money over quickly. We are in the process, we've had an ex-ante done also by PwC in the UK, and that is for both a Jessica property fund but also for a low carbon fund. And we haven't started investments through that fund, but we're expecting for low carbon that will be more than 5 years, probably 5 to 10 years, because they take longer to repay.
Maybe for Don, who is the fund manager, let's say in your case?
Our fund manager is Richard Luigjes. That's his name. He works for a bank, not a commercial bank, but more a bank set up for housing. But it could be any bank. It is, in our case, it was a public procurement. It was not very easy to get banks interested, because also for financial institutions, this is new. And they have a reputation to lose, of course. But this fund manager, they saw the future as well, and they saw the possibilities, and he stepped in. But you need to have a fund manager who is not only good with money and know what is a good investment and what is not a good investment, but also with the right mindset for policy goals, because that is what it's all about. It's not about making money, it's about the policy goals.
And maybe what's the fund manager in your case?
Our fund manager currently is CBRE. Do you have CBRE in Slovenia? CB Richard Ellis are primarily a real estate advisory company. We will go through an OG procurement for our new ESIF funds, but for our 2007-14 programme it's CBRE.
And now that you've mentioned the important is actually what is the public policy part. I was wondering when I was watching your presentation and you were talking about speculative development and so on, so that you are actually investing in speculative development. How do you define speculative development? What is it that is speculative about it? And how is this, let's say, in public interest? How does this fit into the public policy of Manchester?
Yeah. So far, well, defining speculative development, it is commercial developments with no end user. So the developer is going to build a building, it's got no interest from tenants at all. They are going to build it entirely speculative on the basis that they believe they will attract tenants afterwards. Banks in the UK will not do that. They will only invest in property where there is an identified tenant or occupier. Why is it in the public interest? The only speculative developments we've done are in the central business district of Manchester, because there's an identified shortage of commercial floor space. So even though there's a shortage and there's clear market demand, commercial banks, credit committees just have it on their red list. They won't touch it whether there's demand or not. They just won't do it. So it's in the public interest, because the only way we can fill that demand and keep jobs growth and the growth of the economy in the city is for us to intervene. That's where the public interest comes from.
Yeah, maybe I can add, because we have the same thing. Our fund manager invests in projects, like Mark said, with no offices yet, no businesses in the office, so the bank will not finance the project development. And at the same time, he will finance the businesses that they will rent or buy the office, because they do not get a mortgage, because there is no building yet. So that is real market failure. You cannot have it more clear. A bank will not finance a development because there are no clients, and there are no clients because there is no office.
Okay, thanks for this. I just have one more question, perhaps for both of you. But let's say, how important is the managing authority for the success of financial instruments in your cases?
Well, they are key in several ways. Well, they first of all, they need to be able to make it possible to put it in the operational program. They can help with the rules. They can, and in our case, the city of Rotterdam is the managing authority. And at the same time, the city of The Hague was setting up funds. They were setting up a fund in Rotterdam as well. So we have a very strong relationship and learning from each other. And it's also important because you have the audit authorities, of course, they will check about the rules. So you need to be on very good speaking terms with everyone. So the managing authority is your best friend, the accountants is your best friend in this, but it's key.
Yeah, I would agree. It's their money. When you establish the funds, if the fund underperforms, if the fund isn't making any investments, you try and talk to the fund manager. If you don't have success, you would go to your managing authority in our case, you would seek help from them. If you encounter difficulties at operational programme level with the Commission, the natural people to liaise with other managing authority. Absolutely crucial. Our learning from CSI Europe was in places like Seville, places like Poznan, there was a them and us approach. Municipalities feeling that they were being left out, the managing authorities feeling that municipalities weren't engaging with the process, and you only get success when managing authority, fund manager, municipality and the private sector engage and work together. It's, as I said before, all the people who will make it a success appear to all be here, whether it's at municipality level or national level or regional level, or whether it's in the professional services sector.
Thanks. I would like to open the questions for the public now. Torej, vprašanja lahko v slovenščini, lahko v angleščini, po želji.
Ponovno Žipelj, regionalni sklad. Kako je urejeno s tveganji in zavarovanji? What about the risk and splitting of risks and insurance in the case of Manchester? When the loans are in the question.
The risk has primarily been managed. By its nature, we're not competing with banks, so we are taking more risk than the commercial finance sector will take. We've managed that by attracting match funding for projects at project level. Okay, so rather than have a fund that is co-financing the entire development, until recently we never made investments of larger than 50% of the total, ensuring that the risk was spread. More often than not, the risk was spread through the developer's own finance, so we would expect them to have some risk in the financial profile. Also other commercial banks or other lenders, so we would be satisfied that there wasn't just the public sector taking the risk. I know that there are other places where that's not the case and the public sector is taking more risk. Where we're convinced that there is a strong case and the fund manager makes a strong recommendation that the risk is acceptable, we will now go up to 75%. But we rely very heavily, as they do in The Hague, on the skills and expertise of the fund manager to make decisions, and management of risk is within that. So far, we haven't had any defaults on our property investments. We've had one or two on SME loan funds, but that is to be expected. A lot of the SMEs are in very risky sectors. They're taking risks, they've got quite ambitious business plans, but in the larger investments so far we haven't had any defaults.
Yeah, maybe one thing to add. Our fund manager, the success of his work, he feels the success of his work in his wallet. And there was another guy in the CSI Euro project, he said you can see the success in the size of his car. But his salary is also based on the amount of money that's getting back into the fund, so that is that he's got an incentive to invest the money in good projects as well. So apart from spreading the risk with other financing with banks and other investors, and the Commission wants that. So the salary is also based. The salary of the fund manager is also based on the amount of money that returns into the fund.
My name is Robert Gostinčar, landscape architect, as said before. I have question or some issues for both representatives, Mr. Duncan and Obermeier. I know you are probably told about circumstances or about Slovenia, what you know, but maybe just a little bit background. What we hear today or what we are facing is that we have to find solutions or looking forward for these new instruments, a new policy, how to look for investments in the private sector and not only for grants but also for loans. But comparing Slovenia and Western Europe is quite difficult. We are former socialist country, and I come from Maribor. That's part of the Slovenia that it's heavily devastated by the social and economical changes. I'm sorry to be quite long, but I think it's important. So we are facing what you said before, that for example, through that URBACT programs or urban development strategy, you finance, for example, offices, infrastructure, condominiums, apartments, and then also renewable source of energy. But sometimes, also in our case, we are facing with some basic questions or strategies how to solve them. So my questions or my addressing goes on two levels. One is that, for example, maybe in comparison with Den Haag, I appreciate all the projects what you show. I'm very interested in, but for example, like projects that you have, which is a bit out of the frame, Sand Motor, is probably one of the projects that you cannot solve or you cannot face only with or merely with the private-public solutions. So environment and source problems are sometimes quite heavier than the instruments what we are facing for. And another question, for example, for Manchester, is that Maribor was a few decades ago, or before World War, was called Slovenian Manchester. That because we based on a heavy industry, especially textile, and because we lost all that industry, we are facing how to make kind of push into economy, because we are facing a large scale of empty offices. The market for apartments is not flourishing, it's just quite opposite. So how you sometimes deal with this push? We will not solve the problems with some new offices or some new basic infrastructure, but we have difficult questions to solve. And just a small add is that what is the independence of these local authorities, of managing authorities, because in our case we are facing the lack of regional authorities. You said that you are set in the South Holland regional area, and you also the Northwest England area. In Slovenia, I have sometimes the feeling, like maybe I exaggerate, but that we are sometimes addressing mother, that's the government in Ljubljana, to have some spare money for ice cream, and we don't have any authorities or independence on the local level. I'm sorry to be long, but I think it's worth it.
Okay. All the problems that you describe are problems that we've had to address over the last 20, 30 years. Depopulation, deindustrialisation, and it's been a very long journey. And I think we're not at the end of that journey, but we've turned a corner and we've managed to change the commercial base of our city from one that was built on heavy industry and polluting industry to one that now is more based around smarter technologies. It's more SMEs than large corporations, it's professional services, etc. And that's been a very long journey. And that's been a journey that has been financed in two ways, through a lot of public sector investment in the 90s in particular, more public sector investment, less size, but throughout the decade 2000 to 2010, more public investment and of quite considerable scale. But alongside that, it has been complemented by a very private sector focused approach, that the public sector funded approach couldn't go on forever, and that was recognised in the 90s and in the 2000s that we had to be facing the private sector, because ultimately the private sector was the only sustainable way to change the city into what it needed to be. So our public investment focused on public realm infrastructure that would attract the new types of companies that we wanted to see. So there is no denying that it was built on a foundation of grant funding. I think if we bring it forward to 2015, I think Tom made the point, and also our colleague from PwC, financial instruments aren't the solution to everything. We are lucky that they are increasingly the solution to most things. We also have a very large ESF programme which is going to be focused on giving our citizens the skills to work in the new industries, to work in the new financial sectors, etc. So there is still a place for subsidy. We have a very large business support grant regime as well as SME loans. We also still have traditional business support where we encourage SMEs to innovate and expand. So there is still a place for grant. It's just I haven't talked about it because of the subject being about financial instruments. There still is that place, and financial instruments aren't the solution to everything. I found it interesting, your question before, I think it was you who asked the question, about where is the space in financial instruments or private investment for better places to live, cleaner air, nicer environment, sustainable ecology, etc. And we feel the same. We don't know what the answer is. We talked again last night a little bit about this. That's the next place to go. Eventually the banks are going to take over what was on the screen, and we won't do it because we can't compete with banks. But the next thing will be the next hard things. So it will be our small towns. I live in a small town outside of Manchester and we have a lot of problems. We're not the central business district. We have lots of empty shops. We have streets that we can't afford to repair. How do we face that next challenge? How do we make our cities nicer places to live? How do we deal with air quality? And see if I can describe this the way we described it last night. Municipalities always just get people coming and giving them problems. How, as municipalities, can we start solving more of those difficult problems? Cleaner water, cleaner air, nicer streets, warmer houses. How can we start dealing with those problems and making the private beneficiaries pay for the improvements that we make? We don't know what the answers are, but that's going to be the next step. How, if you create cleaner streets, cleaner air, that the private sector benefits from, they grow because people want to work there, it's a nice place, their employees are happy. How do you attract that value? And I believe there'll be people here who will know better, but I believe that there is some work within the Horizon 2020 programme, which is looking at how you put financial value onto ecosystems and ecology and clean air, and how you start to try and capture some of that value. So it's something we're very interested in as a next step for this type of approach. Is that okay? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, maybe to add about yesterday evening we spoke about this, and when a city makes an investment and our property owners and they don't like the investment, they come to the city and say, well, I want some money because my ownership is well, it was 100,000 euros and now it's only 80,000, so I need 20. And if you can change that way of thinking, and if a city makes an investment and the ownership from 100,000 euros will go to 120, maybe you can go to the property owner and say, well, if I'm going to do this investment, in cleaner air or public space or whatever, you get 120, but maybe I can get 5 or 10 from that 120. So you need to be able to search for the revenue and it is an idea, and it is probably difficult, but these are the things we need to do in the future.
Hvala. Miran Gajšek, the city of Ljubljana. I have one question. The project Logistics North Bolton in Manchester. Who took the decision that this exact project will be co-financed or financed from all those financial instruments in your city, in the region, and in your country? Why I'm asking this? Because in Slovenia, it's not a problem how to use all the funds. We will use all the funds from 2007, 2013. The problem is priorities. And how, which will be really the impact, social impact, economic impact, and territorial impact of using that funds. Thank you.
Okay, for Logistics North, who made the decision? There's within the governance and the route map that we showed, there's different decision-making paths. There's the decision. There's the route for the city, and then there's the route for the managing authority. For us, our investment strategy wasn't written by the managing authority. It was written by the regional partnership. Okay, Manchester led that partnership, but it was across the whole, not the whole, most of the northwest region of England, a population of 5 million people. We wrote the investment strategy. It was our strategy, we owned the strategy, and the fund manager was procured on the basis that they convinced us they would be able to deliver that investment strategy. So it wasn't an investment strategy from London or Brussels or somewhere else in the region, an office. It wasn't written by civil servants. Well, it was written by civil servants in the municipalities, not at a higher level, which has been important in terms of ownership. It's been important in terms of pipeline. In terms of that particular project, how was the decision made to invest in it? The project was taken first of all to the municipality. It's a town called Bolton, it's my hometown, okay? The landowner, which is the British Coal Authority, went to the local authority and said, we've got this site, we want to develop it, and they secured the approval of their local authority, okay? So Bolton Council said, this is a strategic priority for Bolton, okay? Stage one. We won't talk to a project unless it has the approval of the local authority. So if Logistics North was in Ljubljana, we would not talk to the owner of that site unless you were supportive of the scheme and it met your requirements. Why will we not do that? Because without you, they might not get planning permission, they might not get the road they need, or you can cause problems. If it's not the project that you want, you could cause problems. If it is the project that you want, you can help remove the problems, okay, and make it a success. So the first stage is developer, second stage is the city or the municipality, and then the third stage is the fund manager. So even if it's your favourite project in the world, the developer likes it, you like it, the fund manager says, it's a terrible project, I'm sorry guys, it just doesn't work, then it's finished, okay? So then it goes to the fund manager makes an assessment, says it is a good investment, it then goes to an investment board, and the investment board is made up of the municipalities that have formed the partnership. That is the final decision. The managing authority doesn't have any say in that final decision. It's made by the municipalities and the fund manager within the fund. Does that answer the question?
Yes, but it has to be confirmed on the state level?
No.
No.
No. The fund itself, when we established the fund, it had to be approved by the managing authority. We do everything we do with the fund with the managing authority, but the managing authority fully supports the process that it is the fund manager that makes the decision. Okay? The fund once the managing authority has agreed the investment strategy, they remove themselves to a position of compliance. That is all that they don't interfere in decisions at all unless there is a compliance, a regulatory compliance issue breaching ERDF regulations. That's the only role that they play in that process. I don't know if you... Yeah.
I'm Urban Riha from Institute for Spatial Policies. I have a question. How big is the investment portfolio in such funds? Do you aim for a few? What is the number of investments that you make simultaneously? Is it a few big projects, or you aim for a large number of small projects? Thank you.
It's different in both cities. Ours is mostly a portfolio of large projects, 5 to 10 million, maybe 12 million euros. That is driven by the nature of the project. The fund manager charges fees. It tends to be larger projects, and it's more worthwhile if it's larger projects, but that was how the fund was established.
Yeah, and in The Hague it's the same. It's up to the fund manager, because he is responsible for the risk, of course. So it's his decision, but we set a minimum that he cannot put more than 25% of the money in the fund into one project. So he needs to have at least 4 projects. So it's not one fund, one project. That's not a fund. Then it's a financial instrument for one project.
Linking back to the question about risk, once the fund is in the market, there are, well, in Manchester anyway, there's a limited number of these types of developers, and you can get to a point where you're overexposed to 1 or 2 developers, and that has happened, and we've had to make risk management decisions because one single company has come for 2 or 3 loans, and all 3 loans would have been out at the same time. So there can be constraints if you get overexposed to to 1 or 2 developers.
Hello, and thank you for a very interesting presentation. My name is Zinka Shimonovic. I come from the city of Ljubljana, and have a concrete question, because so far, maybe it's just my problem, but I didn't understand who puts the money in the fund. Okay, one part I got it. It comes from the managing authority and the structural funds, but if I understood correctly, another part is put in from your partnership, the different cities or region or whoever is in the partnership. Does the private sector put some money in it too, or so? Could you please just illustrate me the structure concretely of your fund, and it will be much clearer to me. Thank you.
Okay. We have a holding fund, similar to what PwC proposed before. We have a holding fund where 50% is ERDF and 50% is provided by another public sector lender. In our case, it's the UK government. Okay? But when projects come forward and the holding fund gives the money to our investment fund, we have to replace the other 50%. So we only access the ERDF, and we require the projects to bring the match funding with them. And that is nearly always, I think it is in fact always private sector money. So 50% ERDF and then 50% private sector. And every time we do a project, the government at holding fund takes its 50% back that it essentially lent to us to make the holding fund be 100%. So every time we do a deal, the private sector brings 50% and we put in 50% generally. Sometimes we do more, but there is always private sector investment in there. The municipalities do not invest or haven't to date invest. The investment from the municipalities has been in running the fund. The municipalities pay a fee, about 30,000 euros a year, which covers the costs of running the fund, but the municipalities don't tend to make investments into the projects. It's private sector plus ERDF. Is that clear? It's okay?
Yeah, in The Hague we also have a holding fund, 40% ERDF money, about 10% is national co-finance, and 50% is from the city of The Hague. So we have 100% in the holding fund with enough match funding for the projects. That money is then put into the urban development funds. And the fund manager has, in his investment strategy, a goal of making at least an extra 100% private money on average. So he can invest in a project for 70% and invest in another project for 30%. But at the end, it should be the ERDF amount of money should be about 25% of the total project cost. So that's the idea. And further, the city of The Hague has no cost at all. So the cost of the holding funds, which are very low, and the cost for the urban development funds is all should all be paid by the interest rates. So there are no costs. It's just the first investment.
Torej, hvala lepa. Zgleda, ni več vprašanj. Thank you very much, Mark and Tom, for your very thorough explanations. In hvala seveda vsem, ki ste prišli na ta dogodek, in upam, da bo pravzaprav to znanje, ki smo ga danes pridobili, nam koristilo v prihodnjih letih, torej da bomo zares lahko, bi rekel, preizkusili te inštrumente tudi v Sloveniji. Hvala. Še kakšno dodatek s strani ministrstva? Ne. Okay.
Hvala vsem, ki ste prišli. Hvala organu upravljanja, da se nam je danes pridružil. Simona, hvala. Thank you for your presentations. Jaz upam, da je to začetek razprave, ki nas bo po 6 letih pripeljala do tega, da bomo lahko mogoče vsaj en projekt otvorili, da je bil narejen s finančnimi inštrumenti, z uporabo finančnih inštrumentov. Zdaj vas povabim na en manjši prigrizek, ne bom rekla, da je prav kosilo. Pa izkoristite to priložnost, da se mogoče pogovorite tudi med sabo, da postavite kakšno vprašanje še zunaj, ki si ga zdaj niste upali. Hvala še enkrat.